Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kia ora tātou. Just to acknowledge Mr. Bakshi for his for at least pulling the bill out of the hat for starters, because I know what it's like trying to get a hat out of the getting a bill out of the hat, especially as a private member's bill. So congratulations to him, and just to support the general comments with respect to wiping a bill off the statute books that hasn't been used for 30 years, and obviously the Māori Party is going to support that particular move. I did want to take the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to just give some other background to this bill and acknowledge a queer that's passed away today and put it into some sort of perspective. The bill there's a bit of a history here, but it goes back to, I suppose, the repeal of the 1915 law, which says any land can be available or made available to New Zealand Defence Forces for military manoeuvres. And talking about that particular bill today, for those who don't know, a queer by the name of Te Manawanui Pauroa of Kaiwhaiki in Whanganui, she has been mourned. 103 years, I'm told, was her age, and she passed away today. And just imagine that she was one in her lifetime would have welcomed home. Sorry? Oh. She would have been one, this queer that passed away today. She would have welcomed home troops who went away overseas in World War I. So it sort of, I suppose, adds another dimension to think that this amazing queer of over a century old, who in her lifetime would have seen and actually experienced the Military Manoeuvres Act in operation. Mr. Speaker, as other speakers have said, basically the legislation enabled the Governor-General to declare that any land could be made available for military manoeuvres, such as military training or war games. It was a special circumstance. I believe a bill passed as a reaction to the advent of First World War and the consequences of military mobilisation. But, sir, the question is it still necessary to conduct such military manoeuvres today? And in light of the fact that it hasn't been used for 30 years, probably not. Of course, any piece of legislation which is used to justify the taking of Māori land will provoke extra scrutiny, in particular from us. And so in the course of researching this bill, we approached the Ministry of Defence to understand whether the bill had had any immediate impact on Māori land or Māori landowners, and even indeed Māori personnel working in the forces. The Military Manoeuvres Act 1915 did not permit the taking of land for defence purposes, but rather actually permitted the New Zealand Army to occupy land for military manoeuvres by proclamation. In other words, for temporary activity. No interest in the land was ever acquired, so that's pretty good. The land always remained owned by the legal owner, and the Defence Force use ended with the end of the military manoeuvres authorised by the proclamation. So that is not to say that Māori land was not acquired for defence purposes. Quote, it certainly was, but that was under the Public Works Act 1981, which is obviously a fair way on in time, and it was the focus of my private member's bill earlier in the year. Mr. Speaker, the Waitangi Tribunal has found the compulsory taking of land and resources without consent and sometimes without compensation by legislation unsanctioned by Māori communities has given rise to an enduring and powerful grievance. So my bill proposed that land sold to the Crown should be offered back to the original owners and all their descendants, or that compensation should be offered. As we all know, that fine bill was voted down, and so the vexed issue of the acquisition of Māori land, and importantly its return, will remain to be dealt with on another day. Suffice to say, Mr. Speaker, that the impact of the Public Works Act has been significant right across areas of current legislation, and indeed in this bill. For instance, the land was acquired in 1915 at Featherston for a camping ground under the provisions of the Public Works Act 1908. And in fact, the New Zealand Defence Force still holds lands at Trentham Military Camp under the Public Works and Reservations legislation. Mr. Speaker, we cannot address the issue of the Public Works legislation in this bill, but we see no reason not to support the initiative put forward by Mr. Bakshi to repeal an outdated Military Manoeuvres Act, and as such, as I said, we'll be supporting this bill when it's taken as a vote.
Mr. Speaker.